entitled action, find the defendant not guilty of the crime of assault by force likely to produce great bodily injury and with a deadly weapon, in violation of Penal Code Section 245A1, a felony, as charged in Count 1 of the amended indictment. This 29th day of April, 1992.
The 1992 civil disturbances were a watershed event in the long history of our great city and the life of the nation as a whole. Whether we lived in Los Angeles at the time or not, many of the images and statistics surrounding the event were seared in our consciousness. The original police stop and widely publicized beating of Rodney King. The movement of the trial to Simi Valley, an area with a very different relationship to law enforcement than the city of L.A., the not guilty verdict for the police officers, and resulting shock that reverberated around the city and the country. Then the world watched shock turn into anger as many people registered their protest and a relatively small number turned to acts of violence, including setting fires, looting, committing violence against their neighbors.
At least 20 to 30 young people throwing rocks. You can hear them impacting against cars and against trucks. I haven't seen any police officers coming here. Only police.
Seeing the fire, the smoke in the air, and feeling scared for the first time in my life on a level that I had never experienced, and feeling that it was a war zone. As a Korean American, I had lived in the United States over 25 years, and never in my life had I heard the terminology Black Korean conflict.
So there was high tension because there was way too much violence, and people were turning to almost a vigilante justice with guns. And so there was a big problem. And then on top of that, the police were like an occupying force as seen by many community residents, and also used too much violence. And that was seen in terms of police beatings and complaints and in sometimes killings.
Well, economically things were bad. The LA Police Department at that point in time were in many ways a bunch of organized thugs. Daryl Gates was really a disservice to the city. He wanted to run the city. He and Tom Bradley were at each other. There was some animosity among predominantly Koreans who had moved into the inner city, and some of the other residents, ethnic people of color, African American, Hispanic, in part because the Korean community was very closed, and so they'd come to the community, basically draw resources out of the community and then leave, and really didn't participate in helping become a part of the community and support the community.
One of the things that I remember most clearly from the footage around all that happened on April 29th, 1992, was that there was a lot of conflict between Korean and African American communities. That was the dominant narrative, and also that there was a lot of looting and there was a lot of lawlessness. Those facts were true, but they were part of a much bigger story that had to do with people's alienation, that had to do with political and economic disenfranchisement, that had to do with police brutality and then later on neglect, that had to do with people not feeling like they were listened to or cared for, or that their whole being was respected and responded to. And that's where we as people of faith need to remember that churches did step in at that time and have continued to be a presence in a lot of these neglected urban areas where there were a lot of flashpoints during the riots. But I really believe that we need to remember that this was a bigger story than just that of people acting out because they were angry and felt greedy.
On April 30th, the day after the civil disturbances began, while the city was still in chaos, Los Angeles United Methodist ministers and their congregations established Operation Resurrection. Led by Reverend Thomas Hill, Operation Resurrection immediately began to provide food, clothing, medical help, housing assistance, and counseling to displaced and traumatized residents. Holman Church served as a donation site for food and other supplies, which were distributed to other churches and organizations throughout South Central Los Angeles and the Pico Union area. Korean American Food and Shelter Services was another critical food and supply gathering and distribution site for residents of hard-hit Koreatown. Compton Enterprise United Methodist Church provided United Methodist serving stations offering social services information, groceries, medical care, clothes, child care, and prayer partners. Gifts of money and supplies flooded into the Los Angeles district from United Methodist churches and also from synagogues, Mormon congregations, Seventh-day Adventist churches, local schools, and individuals. The United Methodist General Conference and the International Methodist Relief Agency provided close to $75,000 within a week of the city's disruption to ease the immediate suffering of Angelenos in crisis. Only a few days after the April 29th flashpoint, while the United Methodist churches in Los Angeles were helping communities still in turmoil, the top policymaking body of the United Methodist Church was meeting over 2,000 miles away in Kentucky. A delegation of ministers from the Los Angeles area, led by Reverend James Lawson from Holman United Methodist Church, reported to the General Conference on the tragic conditions in L.A. Deeply moved by the L.A. delegation's report, Reverend Joseph Sprague from Columbus, Ohio, suggested that the General Conference help Los Angeles begin the hard work of rebuilding by creating a Shalom Zone. This was envisioned as a city block with rebuilt homes, businesses, social service stations, and listening posts where community residents could express their concerns. The Los Angeles District Committee and Strategy Committee were asked to implement this Shalom Zone with oversight from a national committee. Dr. Robert Smith and Ms. Gagne Dixon from LA District United Methodist Ministries began coordinating churches on the ground to make the Shalom Zone idea a reality in LA. Realizing that one Shalom Zone was not enough to address the economic, social, and spiritual needs in diverse Los Angeles communities, the LA District instead decided to create 4 initial Shalom Zones in Koreatown, South Central Los Angeles, Pico Union, and East Los Angeles. These initial Shalom Zones were centers of rebuilding, rehabilitation, feeding programs, and community resource development and worship.
To take an area, a depressed area, and plug into it all kinds of assistance to help transform a community so that there would be the possibilities for economic development, development of social structures, educational resources, a holistic kind of approach to how we dealt with the underlying causes that were at the root of this moment in which the cities were really in need of support.
Once the 4 Shalom Zones were established in Los Angeles, 3 new communities of Shalom were developed in the Santa Barbara and Long Beach districts, such as the Zafaria Shalom Zone Agency. Located in Long Beach, Zafaria Shalom offered a food pantry, job training, health education classes, and a teen youth empowerment program focused on financial literacy. Zafaria Shalom also ran a domestic violence education and prevention initiative targeted to the African American church. Within 2 years of the establishment of LA's Shalom Zones, the United Methodist General Board of Global Ministries decided to replicate the idea of churches and communities working together to rebuild fractured communities. Training and funding helped catalyze communities of Shalom in urban and rural communities across the country. Communities of Shalom were promoted as geographic areas that were visible demonstration of the gospel of Jesus Christ in action. In the mid-1990s, the management of the original Shalom Zones moved from the Los Angeles district to the California Pacific Annual Conference under the coordination of Reverend Jim Kahn, CalPAC's urban strategist. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, the original 4 Shalom Zones in Los Angeles continued to provide varying levels of community services to neighborhoods in Los Angeles. The Shalom Community Center that originally started in Koreatown as Korean American Food and Shelter Services still operates today. Since 1992, the Shalom Community Center has provided relief services to communities in need. In 1997, the Shalom Community Center established the Korean American Religious Council for Peace as part of its Shalom Zone ministry with religious leaders who are Buddhist, Catholic, Won Buddhist, and Protestant. This group continues to work together and share dialogue to reach peace across religious boundaries. In South Central Los Angeles, Rakestraw Memorial Center at Wesley United Methodist Church underwent major renovations and for many years served the community through after-school education programs, a youth boxing program, nutrition and exercise classes for seniors, a community feeding program, and community health fairs. While the grocery distribution program continues, other programs inspired by the Shalom Zone effort have become dormant over the past few years. In 2011, a collaboration of members from Wesley United Methodist Church and El Buen Pastor began planning activities for a new multicultural and multi-denominational Shalom Zone. For years, the East Los Angeles Shalom Zone, based at La Trinidad United Methodist Church, served the primarily Hispanic local community through serving stations including food distribution to needy families, a youth program, a Head Start program, and a strong commitment to pastoral counseling and help with life and job skills. While La Trinidad Church still serves the community, the Shalom Zone ministry is no longer active. The Shalom Zone that started in Pico Union and served the Salvadoran, Mexican, and Honduran immigrant community is still a vibrant community-centered ministry today. The original building housing Pico Union Shalom was torn down in 2004 to make way for church-sponsored affordable apartments in Casa Shalom, which also includes a multi-purpose community venue and a worship space. Today, Pico Union Shalom Ministry provides a range of activities for Casa Shalom residents and community members, including health and wellness activities such as free aerobic classes and regular health fairs. Pico Union Shalom also offers children's art enrichment activities, an emerging youth program, and ongoing support to immigrant day laborers in the Pico Union community. Pico Union Hispanic Shalom is notable for its embrace of gay, lesbian, and transgendered members, along with traditional Latino families in ministry together. In 2011, a new group of United Methodist churches received training to develop new Shalom Zones to catalyze development and renewal in poor urban neighborhoods. Shalom today is supported by the General Board of Global Ministries and National Communities of Shalom at Drew University. The CalPAC Justice and Compassion Essential Ministry team, along with the Urban Foundation, provide Los Angeles area Shalom Zones with additional funding, training, and coaching assistance. The local learning network of communities of Shalom meets regularly to share best practices and mutual support. The work of changing economic, political, and spiritual systems in disenfranchised communities is slow going. There is never enough money. Racism and classism remain deeply entrenched obstacles, and there are political barriers within and outside of the church. And yet, we are called to create communities of shalom now more than ever.